a number of announcements recently at GE. A little while ago, several years ago, we started a group called Predix, which is actually sort of the equivalent of a large data aggregation platform based in California that helps the industrial customer base of GE aggregate and manage what is otherwise sensitive data. So it's this giant vacuum cleaner that pulls in lots of data from different business units within GE and also their customers. So everything from oil wells to jet aircraft engine to turbines in utility plants and also things that are attendant to the enterprise. And the point here being that with 150 billion plus in revenue, mostly in the industrial space, GE sort of sits at the epicenter of gathering lots of information from different devices. So what we've done is created a platform that allows us to aggregate this information, then create a set of applications underneath that. One of which we just recently launched is a company called Current. We issued a press release around it a couple of weeks ago or so, which is really the amalgam of series of product groups within GE coupled to the data platforms to create sort of an Uber energy management and monitoring and optimization platform, moving from optimization of facilities or configuring assets to actually orchestrating those assets, leading to what we call sort of higher non-energy related outcomes. And I bring this up because over the last day or so, we've talked a lot about the industrial internet, all right? So lots of smart meters, we all know these statistics. Internet connected light bulbs, something GE is close to, should exceed about 100 million by 2020. Connected cars, we've got a lot of that activity going on. And then, as a practical matter, we're collecting close to 10 to the 6 terabits of data a day right now. So we know that there will be billions and billions of connections, many of which are residential or consumer in their orientation, and then a handful of which are actually sort of industrial, the ones that are important to the folks here in this room. And the core question is, what sense can you make out of it, and how can you monetize that information? By a show of hands, I mean, how many people's enterprise customers find the energy data that you give them relevant after, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Real relevant, not so relevant? What have you done for me lately? My experience in this space has been, there's a yield curve. Early on, when you're capturing savings for customers, you get 10 to 15% savings, and then the person who was your champion or sponsor in the account sort of looks at you and says, I need more, right? My budget now is baseline to what I did last year. You've saved me a ton of money. I can do an IRR out forever had I never met you before, but I'm not at that point. So the thing that we're focused on at GE is how do you make other decisions with that information? How do you combine those pieces of data that we're all gathering? When you think about what the folks in this room do, we create these neural networks effectively in the infrastructure. With or without the utility sort of cooperation, depending on where they're at in the network evolutionary phase, we're lighting up these buildings and these facilities all over the country and collecting all kinds of interesting data from sensors and other things, largely with the primary goal up front of optimizing the facilities and creating a better cost environment for the customer. So we're about 4 or 5 years into Gen 1, lot of success, lot of misses. And as we move into sort of Gen 2 of this particular industry, I think the principal advantage that we can all bring to the table is actually the combinatory impact of taking these data sources and slapping up against things that we otherwise would not consider energy related. And so I draw on this from my prior experiences in the space. And so what we have is a platform, as a general matter, Predix, that is obviously cloud-based. It touches a lot of different data, but the idea is to create a level playing field among data sets so that when we take energy data or other forms of information, we can put them up against each other, or the customer can through the platforms we're all creating, for purposes of coming up with unique combinations of information that, one, also make our collective businesses very sticky in the customer's mind, but also make interesting value propositions for the customer. What I mean by that is moving from the cost equation, meaning am I saving the customer money, to the revenue equation. Can I help them actually make more money under the circumstances? And benign examples can be simple things like stocking policies. Right? We all hear about this, and those of you who work in the grocery space know this to be true, that slight deviations in how a facility is operated during the stocking period when no one's in the store buying anything can actually save a heck of a lot of energy, and also correspondingly save the customer a lot of money. That's a simple process change that affects the customer's bottom line in a way that's somewhat differentiated from when they initially engaged any of us to do optimization. So what are we doing at Current? So what GE is doing is, and this is relevant to what we're all talking about today, is we have all these independent solutions. I think the pointer works here. Let's see. No. Whoops. We've got LED, large LED business, a large solar business. We have a very significant set of storage businesses, on-site gas, and then obviously the GE balance sheet financing, which has been a tremendous benefit to us in this particular industries. Going after commercial customers, and we've amalgamated it all together and put it into a company we call Current that is software enabled, so all this stuff is stitched together with software for purposes of creating an energy application set that we can actually use to optimize various assets that are on the customer grid. And then also create and building intelligent environment where we take these data sets and actually use them for other things. So rule number 1, optimize a site. Rule number 2, if possible, generate power. Rule number 3, monetize what we can optimize, so to speak. Look at different data sources. And then this is where we think the holy grail exists for all of us in this market. And I think this is also where we're going to catalyze a lot of growth. Because as energy becomes, for lack of a better way of characterizing it, less sexy, more commonplace over the next few years, what we do, people really understanding what we do, got to move it to a higher ground, which is, okay, how do I make money off of this type of information year after year when moves, adds, and changes arise? So what we are focused on as an industry, I just drew this up the other day just to think about what we're all doing, is we've got all these sources and loads. And right now we're sort of in this metering, monitoring, control area to a large degree, putting assets in the ground, focusing in on, as an industry, data management and analytics. And Nirvana really being sort of this business and customer application sector, figuring out better ways to mix assets together, building business productivity apps, and then obviously being smarter about how our customers participate in the markets. Let's see. So rule number 1, let's connect the infrastructure. Rule number 2, let's think about data applications with and beyond energy telemetry, which is probably sort of the principal issue. It's a little bit hard to gather and think about in the context of what we all do on a day-to-day basis, but it's actually where we think the industry is headed under the circumstances, because all the good work that I think people in this room and in this industry are doing has a shelf life. And the shelf life is relatively close to when you hit that IRR inflection point that we've been talking about all day long with a customer. After 12 to 14-month payback, I got to answer the same question again, which is, can I get another 12 to 14-month payback on the site that I just optimized? And the answer is, it's probably going to be pretty tough. So then the issue is, what can you do with the information? So here's a set of questions or issues that have absolutely nothing to do for the time being with what we've been talking about. So 90% of all purchases are still taking place in the store. Right? 10% of all purchases take place online. 72% of millennials, my kids and those folks, research before they go to the store, and then they sometimes make a decision. But 2 or 3 customers are not finding the information they need in stores, and 43% leave on an unhappy basis. Okay. The other interesting factoid, 70 to 80% of people in stores use their smartphones with Wi-Fi on or the Bluetooth on. So what do we all do in this room? We put sensors in sites. Some of them are Bluetooth enabled. All of them are always connected, either via fixed line or a data network that's wireless. Why not use some of that infrastructure for other things? Right? Understand the consumer experience. We all know the adage that part of the store that's hot and dark probably doesn't generate a lot of foot traffic. Part of the store that's well lit, not too bright, and relatively temperate attracts a lot of people. Our customers constantly look at camera data and point of sale data to try to figure out how to better improve store returns, how to improve the customer experience. But all this information sort of sits at the doorstep of what we all do as an industry, particularly if we're working inside of facilities. So what can you do with this? Heat maps. People do this now in other industries of stores by departments. Store journeys. Where's a customer going when they walk into a store? Right? So the sensors that we have to modify or monitor humidity and also depend on wireless technology. Well, there are companies that are out there now that actually just allow you to deploy Bluetooth technology inside of it, pick up a signal from a phone or the Wi-Fi signal, and just follow the customer around. Combine that with energy data, you know that a hot section C is probably not going to generate a lot of traffic or as much as a cool section B where a girl's shoes happen to be. And it gives the customer the ability to figure out how to engage in moves, adds, or changes. Why is that important? Moves, adds, and changes for us as an industry are really good. The more the customer changes the environment, the more likely it is they're going to give rise to other energy issues that we can optimize. A static environment doesn't help anybody in this room once we've gotten that ROI. So what can you do? You know, this is from another company that we work with, but the point is you can do couponing, education, optimization, all with the sensor infrastructure that we put in place. What else can you think about? Intelligent infrastructures, neural networks and pipelines, multi-dimensional asset tracking and mapping, point of sale heat maps. And predictive maintenance, probably the single biggest issue we can all deal with right now within the industrial space is how to maintain something on a regular, predictable basis using the energy data that we and the sensor data that we gather for purposes of coming up with signatures or patterns of equipment that we monitor to be able to fix it during the right service window, so as to not take it out of service, sub-optimize the site or the facility. So these are just some interesting things to talk about that at GE we're working on and deploying into the field to capitalize on data generally, but more specifically energy data in the commercial and the industrial space. And then obviously going back to the earlier conversation, there's a whole host of smart utility applications that come out of this that work in the opposite direction once the site's optimized. Questions? Nothing? Go ahead.
Can you just talk more about the multi-dimensional mapping and give
Sure.
us an example of that?
Sure. I mean, data fusion concepts where you take interior data, exterior data, run it through a server, and then image it so people actually understand where things are happening on a particular site or on a particular campus. So simple things like occupancy sensors coupled to temperature sensors coupled to humidity sensors on, say, a college campus. Right? And being able to use a simple tool with indoor or outdoor mapping, get a CAD file of this building or Google Maps on the outside and track the information. You see where people go, and people typically where they go, they generate heat. And where they don't go, you might want to think about optimizing or turning down if you have dynamic abilities to manage the site. So using dynamic mapping on an automated basis with, say, a control system inside a building. Yeah. Yep.
So what about advertising? If you're using all of these sensors to track customer behavior and choices and location, doesn't that give you ammunition to then use that information to beam optimized ads to them that match the preferences they've expressed in the data?
Absolutely. I mean, it's similar to the businesses Sanjay was in before he started this company, which is being able to send out contextual text information, right? Which is the holy grail of telecom, being able to understand what a customer's doing, when they want to do it, and then how to prompt them to do more of it. So the reality is most telcos know where you're at, what you're doing, and what you're doing on the handset at the time when you're doing it, so to speak. Apple has that on your iPhone 6 right now. You can walk into a mall and opt into couponing. Wouldn't it be nice if you could opt into couponing inside a store environment where the store had more control over what you send than Apple? Right? And be able to do it based on where they understand you happen to be in the store at the time when the point of sale or transaction opportunity comes up. And again, that's leveraging the infrastructure. A lot of us who work inside the building, for example, you have to put in a lot of the times you can't use the point of sale network, you can't use the pharmacy's network, so you have to set up your own little energy network, wired or otherwise. And this is just a leveraged use case for that particular network. Use it for, in your case, couponing. Yep.
I was just curious, do you generally find that are customers coming to you and saying, we have a really specific problem that we want to get figured out? Or is it more of a, here's the deal, we'd really like to, cut our energy spend or drive greater foot traffic to one part of it? I mean, do you find customers have an objective, or are you coming in with a suite of tools that you can then deploy through more of a constructive or consultative approach?
I think what we're all finding in this industry is the first order of business is try to figure out how to save the customer money and optimize. But when you start doing that, you immediately engage in that consultative sale. And it's changed the nature of the industry from when, this morning there was a discussion about Schneider and Honeywell being box salespersons, right? 100% correct. It's a box business that's now moving into this consultative hardware, software, and services business. And some companies will make that transition smoothly, and some of them won't, because to make the transition smoothly, you've got to understand data, you've got to understand software, and you also have to understand what you're going to sell to the customer after that optimization period ends. The reason I say we're in Gen 2 in this industry, because Gen 1 was all about just getting sites optimized. And a lot of customers, particularly in grocery, healthcare, big box retail, moved very quickly when the recession hit to save money. Now we're sort of 4 or 5 years into it, and the question is, what have you done for me lately under the circumstances? So it's that consultative engagement that we all sort of engage in when we send our solutions engineers out, or the CEO or somebody else out, for purposes of upselling the additional product to the customer, that we think there's actually a persistent business there. Of going out and working with customers on solving very complex data analytics problems that sit inside of a business that's already been optimized and networked by all of us. Yes?
Thanks. John, this question may not be appropriate, and if so, just tell me, please. But I'm very interested in the GE Current launch, where you're assembling a number of related businesses. Is anything that you're working on with ventures going to tie into that or relate to that? Are you doing product development for them?
Actually, Current was launched inside of GE Ventures. So
Okay.
my colleague Deepa, who's up here, was somewhat critical to that process. But yeah, the charter within the group is actually to start new businesses within GE, both spin-ins and spin-outs. This is actually spin-in, which is we had the assets, we had the technology, and they were sort of underutilized in certain markets. To pull them together, strip away a little bit of the process that is otherwise associated with a 500,000 person company, and try to get the right entrepreneurs in place to accelerate the growth of the business by doing something different. And we have a bunch of these. This is a large one because it started with a very large revenue stream to begin with. Usually they start with much smaller revenue streams. Yes.
So GE is traditionally a B2B company. I'm just curious with this, when you're starting to speak about consumers and just with the ventures group in general, how do you think about that space of B2Cs?
This is still B2B. It's just enabling B2C tools for B2B business owners. So the point is we would turn over these tools to our typical commercial or industrial customer, and then if they wanted to turn them on their ear and deploy them into the B2C engagement, with them being the B and the consumer being the C, that's fine with us.
You're not looking at that space?
We're not looking at that space. No.